Welcome to this unit, Accessibility, Providing Alternative Activities, Crossword Puzzles. Crossword puzzles are an effective and popular alternative to video game activities, and there are many free sites and resources that can automatically build beautiful puzzles for you using a well-designed, standard, tab-delimited term definition file with only minor editing. However, care is required to provide the greatest degree of accessibility. For example, tools that lay out the puzzle board as a graphic are likely to be completely unusable for learners with visual and perceptual differences and may also be impossible to navigate for students using keyboard entry alternatives such as mouth sticks and so forth. We must also consider the difference between accessibility and usability. This may be partially mitigated by selecting tools that generate accessible Word documents and which utilize tables to create grids for the puzzle board layout. I deem these to be partially accessible because they will pass, or can with minor editing, Word's accessibility checker. However, they do not necessarily provide an equitable degree of usability for differently abled learners. Consider, a sighted learner can scan the puzzle board easily and determine that 2 across has been solved and passes through the third letter of the 4-letter word in 1 down. A non-sighted learner might need to do a considerable amount of cursor movement and counting to discover this. Fortunately, free available programs do exist that make crossword puzzles fully accessible to non-sighted learners with features that provide a more equitable experience. Moreover, creating puzzle files for some of these tools can also be done using standard tab-delimited term definition files and adding just one additional and brief step. A Word document example from Crossword Labs. In the following segment, we'll see how to tune up the term definition file, generate the puzzle, and how to download and save the puzzle and an instructor's solution. In this segment, we'll see how to create a nominally accessible crossword puzzle in Microsoft Word format using Crossword Labs. We'll start by tuning up the term definition file to optimize it for generating crossword puzzles. We'll generate the actual puzzle, and then we'll download and save the puzzle and the instructor's solution. So here I have open File Manager, and here's our original term definition file for the instructional technology and media for learning materials. So let me go ahead and open that up. And if we look at this, it's not optimized for a crossword puzzle because crossword puzzle terms should all be a single word without spaces and without hyphens or other kinds of punctuation in them. Okay, so what do we do? And we can consider this when we first create our term definition file so we never have to do this kind of editing. But what would we do with something that's like a 2-word term, a sure model? Well, one of the things we can do is we can take one of those words and put it on the clue side rather than, or on the definition side, and we'll replace the other term that we want to use as the word to be discovered with underscores. So let's take a look at what that would look like. I've already done that editing here. And so here we have, for example, problem solving. We changed it to problem, and then there's our tab and underscores dash solving. And so we take a hyphenated word or 2-word clue and break it up that way, period, the manner in which adults approach learning. Great. Okay, so this is pretty usable as it is, and it's separated by tabs. If we take a look at the Crossword Labs site, let me bring that into view. And look at their instructions. They want the clues to be the word, or not the clues. They want the word then a space, then the clue. Okay, so instead of a tab delimiter, they're using a space. So we're going to need to replace our tabs with spaces and make sure that we have just a single word. So that's pretty easy to do. The other thing I'd like to do, which for Crossword Labs is just going to be a nicety, but will be useful if we start using other sites, is I want to make the first word all uppercase. So the term to be sought, let's make that uppercase. Let's see how we can do that pretty easily and how we can change that tab delimited into a space delimited file. So back to our old friend Excel, and I've highlighted and selected and Control-C'd the text here from our text file, which is tab delimited, and we can just drop that in. Seen that before. Okay, and so I've got all my terms and all my definitions. We can adjust the spacing there so it's a little easier to see. And what I'd really like to do is I'd like to have this as the word, and instead of separate cells, I want to go from a tab to a space and then the definition, and I'd also like to make that all uppercase. How can I do that quickly? Excel makes it real easy. Let's insert a new row here, and we're going to say, you know, this is going to equal the upper of B1, ampersand will concatenate together, and I'm going to concatenate it with just quote, space, quote, an empty space, concatenated with the definition, in this case, our clue. And let's resize that so you can see that's exactly what it's done. Nice. Okay, so now if I just copy that down, I now have exactly the form that Crossword Labs wants. I can simply Control-C, go back to my Crossword Labs site, and there's our puzzle entry. And let's see, what should we call that? Well, let's take a look. If I go look at the properties on that original file, I can just copy that name. And we'll use that as my puzzle name, maybe without the text and without the crossword style variant. Just call it Instructional Technology and Media for Learning. And I'm not going to bother to protect this. You can lock it down so a student or someone else won't accidentally run into your puzzle and be able to edit it on the Crossword Lab site. We're going to download it in any event for you, so that's probably not real important. Generate it, and there it is. And if we're happy with that, we can proceed. If not, Crossword Labs lets you regenerate it to try and get more density or less density or different arrangement of the words, but I'm pretty happy with that. And there's all of our clues. And so now we're ready to save that. And I'd like to save it for my purposes. Word is pretty accessible in this way. And we'll talk about usability being different than accessibility, but it will pass the accessibility checker in Word. And so let's go ahead and download it in Word. And where shall we put that puzzle? I have a temporary file over here. I'll just go ahead and drop it there for now. And if we open that up, there's the puzzle. And don't forget, we also want to download the answer key. And the answer keys for the instructor, so it's not as sensitive about accessibility issues. So I'm just going to save that in Acrobat and go ahead and save that as well. And I would call this answer key. And there we have it. So One last thing, let's take a look back at the original Word document that we downloaded. And notice it's using the old .doc format, okay? And so what you probably want to do is take that and do a file, save as, and let's change that over to the current, the modern format .docx, and just save it as the same name, and there we are. And now, if you look at this, if you check it with Word's accessibility checker, you will get warnings, not errors, and it tells you to check the reading order. Okay, so if we check the reading order, tab, 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 it tabs nicely. But now you see where the usability problems are going to arise, and that is, how does a non-sighted user really know when they're in the grid of the puzzle and when are they not in the grid in the puzzle, and you can see trying to figure out where words might intersect if you have partial solutions and you want to see, well, you know, for across, if we knew what this letter was because we'd already solved 2 down, it's a lot of work for a non-sighted person using a screen reader and tabbing to navigate to try and count that off and figure it out. So again, nominally accessible, but not wildly usable, and certainly a lot more work for the student who's dealing with visual perceptual differences than, say, for a student who doesn't have that, that learning difference. All right, so we'll leave it here for now, and we'll try and address that usability issue in the next segment. A blind gamer's crossword example from Spoonbill Software via Eclipse Crossword. In this segment, we'll explore a quick edit to the term definition file, generating the puzzle in Eclipse Crossword, saving in Across Lite text format, and finally, we'll have a BG Crossword demo. In this segment, let's once again start with a quick edit of the term definition file. You may have noticed that I didn't close Excel at the end of the last segment. I just left it floating out there. And we had converted the format for our other word crossword puzzle. And so that one required that the term and the definition be separated by a space. So now we're going to build the file format for Eclipse Crossword. And a little bit of research tells me that instead of wanting to have a space between the word and its clue, what we want is to have a colon and 2 spaces. And so we'll go ahead and change that. So again, variations on a theme, which is why the tab delimited format is so versatile. That's all there is to it. Now we have our updated file for Eclipse. I can just copy that. Let's start Notepad and paste that in. So there's our file, separated as we want it with a colon and 2 spaces before each clue. And then we'll go ahead and save that. And let's put that in, I've got a directory out there where I put Eclipse Crossword, and I created a directory called Puzzles. And instead of .text, it looks for a file format of ECW. And so let's call this one, we'll call it demo.ecw. All right, now we can close that because we've got it saved. And now we can go ahead and close our Excel. We're done with that. No need to save that because we have our original tab delimited file that we can always go back to. All right, so with that running, we have an ECW file. That's the native Eclipse Crossword format. And so we can, in our next segment, take a look at generating a puzzle with the Eclipse password, Eclipse Crossword, and its capabilities. Most importantly, probably, are its ability to save and export to the Across Lite text format, which will be usable by another tool we'll look at in the final segment, the Blind Gamers Crossword tool, and that will work for people who have visual and perceptual differences. In this segment, we'll explore generating the puzzle with the Eclipse Crossword tool. Now, the Eclipse Crossword tool runs only on Windows, unfortunately, and so it may not be an optimal choice in all situations because users of Chromebooks or Macs may not be able to access it. Or with Mac, you could also be running Parallels or Boot Camp, running Windows as a virtual machine, in which case you'd be able to run it. But it adds complexity. But it is the gateway that we need to our Blind Games crossword demo via the Across Lite text format. So we're going to press on with that. A quick correction before I go further. In the last video, I think I incorrectly stated that the file format is ECW. I've corrected the demo.ecw file that we created. It's EWL is the correct format that we want, or the file extension for the files that we create for the Eclipse Crossword tool. So having created that and with Eclipse already installed, it should be associated. If I just double click it, it'll open up Eclipse, and it's right away recognizing that I'm opening a new word list, and says, what do you want to do from here? So I've got my word list. Let's go ahead and say next, and let's call this instructional technology and media for learning, because that's where we originated the clues for this puzzle. And you could put your name here and copyright year if you want to copyright it, and press on. And this puzzle with this many words needs at least a 12 by 12 grid, and it's recommending a 20 by 20 grid. That's fine. I'm going to just let the defaults be. And now if it was a larger grid, I could scroll around in here and see that it had laid it out in a way that I find acceptable. And if not, you can regenerate the puzzle. But I'm happy with that, and so I'm going to go ahead and say next, and then we go ahead and save this puzzle for later use by the instructor. We could print it and make the printed output available as a downloadable worksheet for students. An interesting option is that you can save it as a web page. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. Save it as a web page, and you can either make sort of a printable web page but in HTML format that can be downloaded. You could print the answer grid. It's interesting, though, to do this as an interactive web page with JavaScript. And if we do that, I'm just going to overwrite the old copy. I created one in preparing for this video. So I'm just going to write that, and it opens up. And this is kind of nifty. You can place this into a SCORM package, or you could place it on an independent website. And this is very good for a learner that does not have any mobility or visual perceptual differences, and it gives you the clues, and you can go ahead and fill out the puzzle. And when you're all done, take a print screen of that to turn into the instructor to prove that you completed the activity. And that's nice, and it's nifty, but it's not getting us where we want to be with accessibility for students that can't access a visual puzzle. So we'll address where we go with that in the next video. In this segment, let's explore how we can use Eclipse Crossword to save the puzzle that we've created in the Across Lite text format. And that's going to be very useful because that's a format that's usable by the blind gamers crossword puzzle tool that we want to work with. So that will give us the maximum accessibility and usability. So let's click on Publish Crossword and Across Lite text format. And we'll call this Instructional Technology and Media for Learning. And that'll be in Across Lite. And where we want to ultimately save this, as the instructor, we're going to save this as a downloadable file that we'll put in Canvas. So you can save it anywhere you like on an intermediate basis. Where the student will want to download it is into the Across Lite directory for the blind gamers or the BG Crossword engine, and that will depend upon where they've installed it on their computer. I'm just going ahead and saving it in a temporary directory for the time being. So again, let's see that again. Across Lite, and name it, and I put it in Eclipse Crossword Puzzles and save it. And that saves as a plain text file. I want to show you one other thing about that format. And as an instructor, we're always concerned about the integrity of student work. And so let's take a look. If we open that with a simple text editor, this is what the Across Lite file format looks like. And you can see that it makes a text-based grid representing the puzzle. The problem with that is that's a readable solution if you're a sighted student. So my strategy for that is to consider when you upload the puzzle file to be downloaded by a student that needs that degree of accessibility, limit who can access that file to only students, say, in a group that are granted privilege for the, call it the accessibility group or something like that, so that other students can't just trivially open this up and see the solution to the student and it's to the puzzle and sort of short circuit their learning process. Kind of defeats the whole purpose. But aside from that, we should now be good to go. And in the next segment, we'll take a look at a demo of the BG Crossword engine actually in operation. In this segment, we'll take a look at an actual blind gamer's crossword demo playing the puzzle we've created. I'll start by starting the BG Crossword puzzle engine.
Welcome to Blind Gamer's Crossword Puzzle. Hit F11 to check or change the load file format. Hit L to load a crossword. Hit Q to quit the program.
As you can hear, the software is almost entirely voice and keyboard driven. And so it prompted us to hit F11 to check the puzzle format, and we'll do that.
Load file format is set to Across Lite text.
Okay, so that's set to the correct input file format that we want to use. Also, the student can hit F1 at any time, and that will open an HTML file which they could then access using their screen reader. Let's experience that now.
The reference manual is displayed in your internet browser. Use your screen reader to read the text.
And I just closed that because I'm not using a screen reader, but that's how a person with a visual difference would access that. Let's go ahead and again, you would have read the instruction manual using your screen reader in order to learn the keyboard commands, and that's a fairly typical thing to do for someone who is working with visual or perceptual differences. You memorize the commands, and so I know that the command to load my file is L on the keyboard. Let's try that now.
The default file format is Across Lite text. Hit Y to accept the default. Hit Escape to change the default, using F11.
I'm happy with that default, so I'll press Y.
English Quick Number 1.
And now I have a menu of the puzzles that came with the product plus the one that we've added. And again, the student would have downloaded the Across Lite text formatted file that we provided from our Canvas shell, and then they will navigate to it using the up and down arrows.
English Quick Number 2. English Quick Number 3. Instructional Technology and Media for Learning.
That's the puzzle I want, so I'll press the return key.
Instructional Technology and Media for Learning has been loaded. 2 across. Malcolm Knowles was a ... who developed a theory of andragogy.
Okay, and there are commands that will allow me to inquire as to how many letters for the current word, and I can change between across clues and down clues using the A and D keys.
1 down. ... Direction. Adult learners tend to have this characteristic.
And when I'm ready, if I want to take a guess at the word, I can press E to enter it.
Enter your answer. S, E, L, F. Self.
And move back to the across clues.
2 across. Malcolm Knowles was a ... who developed a theory of andragogy. You have solved 0 across clues out of a total of 8 across clues. You have solved 1 down clue out of a total of 7 down clues.
Okay, I got that by pressing the P key. Now I can go and enter the solution for 2 if I know it.
Enter your answer. P, S, Y, C, O, L, O, G, I, S, T. Psychologist.
And again, by using the up and down arrows, I can
7 across,
navigate
9 across, 10 across,
other parts.
11 across, 12 across. The methods or techniques used to teach juveniles.
And so now I have a fully accessible puzzle. And actually, it's not too tough to learn these commands. So you could make this the one puzzle for both fully sighted and non-sighted students. The one caution again is that sighted students would probably find it trivially easy to open and look at the puzzle format, the Across Lite text, and that would kind of give them the solution. So that would be a little bit unfortunate. But aside from that, really robust and free solution for your students. Probably the biggest downside is that the software has to be installed locally. It doesn't run through a browser, and also it's tied only to the Windows platform at this time, and I don't think there's any promise of any other platforms in the near future. So if you've got a student running a native Mac, they've got to run a virtual machine running Windows in order to access it, or somehow have access to another Windows machine. But still, for the price and the capability, something that's, I think, very worth considering and possibly using as a learning tool. Thank you for viewing this activity.